Joining us right now is former Navy fighter pilot and intelligence operator, Fox News correspondent Lea Gabrielle. Lea, what will it take to escalate the situation with North Korea, in your view?
Well, I think right now that's what our leadership is trying to do, and they're using sort of a variety of ways. They're using sanctions, they're working with other countries, they're also making it clear that all options are on the table right now. I think when you look at Mr. Moon's point in him basically telling his country that any action, any military action would be agreed upon or would be discussed with South Korea, I think a lot of that is just sort of taking a leadership role in a country that's scared right now because as the tensions are escalating, there's a lot of fear on the Korean Peninsula about what could happen. What if the U.S.
So he's trying to calm his people.
Absolutely, trying to calm his people. And I think that's also what we're hearing when we read the op-ed by Rex Tillerson and by Secretary Mattis, where they're basically saying, look, we do have all options on the table, and we're certainly not going to take military options off the table, but we're trying to do everything else that we can first. As far as de-escalating the tensions, we are starting to see that. We are seeing Kim Jong-un pull back slightly, but you have to remember the rhetoric from that leader has been going on for a long time. Every year when we do military exercises, as we're about to start next week with South Korea, North Korea takes it as a major threat. The leadership there believes that we are preparing to attack their country, and they basically ramp up their rhetoric every time this happens. But the U.S. and South Korea and our other allied countries, we will continue to do our military exercises in that region. That's something that's not going to stop.
It's unfortunate because the truth is you just hit on something so enormous, and that is North Korea is actually backing down.
Right.
North Korea is actually saying, okay, we're thinking twice about making these threats that we're going to strike Guam. We're not even talking about this because of all of the dysfunction happening in Washington.
Again, Trump
that is an enormous development.
And I think that you have to give some credit to the very, very strong rhetoric that the Trump administration put out. I'm wondering, Lea, given your background, do you think the technology is there to reliably take out a North Korean missile if it is launched? Because I wonder if one of the things that caused Kim to back down was the notion that if they tried to launch, we'd have to assume it was going to Guam. We would have taken it out, which would have been a huge humiliation for him. Do you think the technology is at that point where we can reliably do that?
First of all, I think yes. I do have confidence based on our intelligence and our capabilities that that we do have the capabilities in various forms that we're not going to talk about in an open forum. But it's
I
not.
actually have stats on that if you want them.
Can I just finish the point real quick? It's not ideal for us to end up having to shoot down a North Korean missile because that gives away our technology. So if they were to fire off a missile and then we were to shoot it down, that actually gives them information on our capabilities that we don't necessarily want them to have. So none of us want this to actually happen. And Dagan, your stats?
No, so the U.S., we've deployed the THAAD anti-ballistic missile system in Guam and South Korea. The THAAD has a perfect record so far, 15 out of 15 missile knockdowns at a test rate. There are other interceptors in places like Alaska, California. There are 44 interceptors in the ground by the end of this year. The overall record of this type of defense, it's known as mid-course ground-based intercept, has basically a 50% success rate over its lifetime.
And I think the other point is
this is from Lucas Tomlinson, who works for the
our fantastic producer
there in the Pentagon. But it sounds like the technology has advanced significantly since those statistics.
Technology is advanced, but let's also not forget that retaliation from the U.S. would be exactly as President Trump described, and that is not something that North Korea wants. I mean, you look at one of our submarines can carry 24 intercontinental ballistic missiles with nuclear warheads. 24 on one submarine, USS Kentucky, for example. So this is something that, North Korea will ramp up this rhetoric, but at the end of the day, it's just not going to work out well for them. And I want to just mention this as well. There's a big concern over a conventional strike on the Korean Peninsula and how that would affect our friends in South Korea, and particularly Seoul. There's a big concern over that. But if you look at some of our strikes, just our simple ISIS strikes that we've done in the past, you'll see that the U.S. does have the ability to do surgical strikes. So taking out certain systems, taking out certain buildings does not necessarily mean that people are going to die from one conventional attack on the Korean Peninsula. The problem, of course, is the retaliation and what happens next.
But as a portfolio manager, you can understand I'm looking for the solution that doesn't cause a market sell-off.
Right, and that's what everybody wants.
And I think a surgical strike, because of the risk to Seoul, that and the notion of 24 nukes, I mean, there's no question that this guy would have to be nuts to take us on, but of course he may be
He's
nuts.
Yeah.
He may be nuts.
Yeah, so what our team's kind of been looking at is what are the prospects of if they launch something, we take it out. And I think the market might actually cheer that. You're right. The market doesn't want to see any escalation, but if there is an escalation, that's the best outcome if we are successful.
That we get ahead of it.
Exactly. And then we kind of defang him, because when you think about it, if you defang him, if he overplays his hand and he is humiliated, the military could take him out, which the markets would really cheer.
Yeah, and even though the U.S. says we don't want regime change, that's basically what we're talking about, aren't we?
Well, we're going to be very careful in our language.
The CIA, Mike Pompeo, the head of the CIA, has talked about separating the leader, Kim, from his arsenal, his nuclear arsenal.
But we're going to be very careful in what language we use because of the larger and the broader impact that it can have. And, of course, at the end of the day, China doesn't want reunification. North Korea, South Korea, our ally, they all have different sort of dogs in this fight. And so we're going to be very careful about what language we use publicly in this scenario.
There's a difference between regime change and regime collapse. And I think what I've been reading and what I think a lot of foreign policy experts are saying, if you want a really positive resolution, the idea is to get the generals in North Korea thinking about how rich their counterparts are in China, and that Kim is getting in their way. And then to Dagan's point, you separate Kim from his nuclear arsenal, and then you don't reunify, you simply change one dictator for one that's a little more sane.
Yeah, and explain how they're sucking all the money out of the economy for the nuclear ambitions and really starving everybody else. I want to get to Venezuela this morning because government forces raided a prison yesterday, killing nearly 40 inmates as the Nicolas Maduro regime seeks to regain control from gangs at prison facilities. Venezuelan police raided the home of the nation's former attorney general as well. He's become a key opposition figure to Maduro. Your thoughts?
Well, Maduro is just going to basically take out any opposition figures. But to specifically talk about the prisons, there have been periodic raids on prison by the government, and that's because the prisons are essentially overrun by these gangs that have access to automatic weapons. They can have access to hand grenades. So there are these very violent gangs that are basically overrunning the prisons there. But I think this is basically just the broader Maduro tactic right now is to basically just smash anything that can be opposition and to try to maintain as much control as he possibly can over his country.
All right, we will leave it there. Lea, great to have your insights. Thanks so much.